let's go, we flipped a coin. The first opening statement for 2 minutes will be Mayor Caldwell, and then Ms. Castillo will be second, and then Josh will start the questioning.
Thank you, Bob, and thank you to the Walker Institute of Politics. Bob has long been what we call a statesman in Ogden City. As a former county commissioner, worked for the city, everything else. Can we give it up one more time for Robert Hunter and the Walker Institute of Politics? Thank you, Bob, for everything that you've done. I appreciate it. You've long been a great leader in our community. This is an interesting format, and I always like to start with thanking the other candidates that have chosen to put their name on a ballot. Those that haven't done it have no idea how much work, how scary it can be, and how unique that experience is. So I will offer my congratulations to those that have done that, and to Ms. Castillo for wanting to get involved and get in the game and make Ogden a better place. I am really proud of what Ogden City's accomplished in the last 8 years. And the one reason I'm choosing to run again is we have a lot of unfinished business. A lot of you have read a lot about what's gone on here in the last little while, and you probably felt some of it today when you tried to find a parking spot at night school. UTA approved a budget just 2 weeks ago for $92 million for the Ogden BRT project, which hopefully in the next round of mayoral debates, you can all ride the bus rapid transit, get right on into the heart of campus. But there are a lot of big projects like that that we have worked for a long, long time to get accomplished in Ogden. And I want to see those get across the finish line. They're critically important to me. I think they're critically important to our community over the next number of decades. Some of the decisions we make in the next 4 years will transform our community for a long time to come. What we've done with economic development and access to jobs, just 2 weeks ago, there was an article that said Ogden City, the Ogden metro area, is the #1 job-creating community in the entire United States of America. When I came to school here at Weber State, that was not the case. When we got done, we sent our resumes around and tried to find a place where we could go get a job. There are jobs and opportunities here that we've worked really hard to build and to create a culture and an ecosystem for our business community. So those investments come in and they matter, and that's something we really look to continue. That is a lot.
Good evening. Thank you for everybody being here. Thank you to the Walker Institute for hosting us today. And my name is Angel Castillo, and I am running to be your mayor. We have a big thing coming up. It's called the election. It's on November 5th, and you have a choice to decide whether or not you're going to be participating in the community, what kind of community you're going to have, and what sort of businesses are going to be available to you. And we're staring down the barrel at some things that are a little uncomfortable, like housing affordability issues, underfunded education issues, and a severe lack of being able to recruit qualified officers to have a fully staffed police department. So these are things that are important to me, and what's really important to me is communication and transparency. And since we're speaking about communication, I would like to remind you that my opponent has not held a town hall in 8 years. That's how much your voice matters to this administration. When I'm elected, I pledge to hold town halls every single quarter, and I plan to have a monthly report card listing everything we're doing and how we're spending your tax dollars. It's an important thing that we are connected to the community. And I'd also like to point out to you when we're talking about this debate tonight that when Mr. Caldwell says Ogden Clearfield Metro, he's talking about 600,000 people. Ogden is 900,000. So when you say 1,000 jobs, isn't that awesome? Well, 90, excuse me, 90. When you say 100,000 jobs, that doesn't really mean much if it's spread out over 600,000 people for Ogden Clearfield Metro. That's an important thing to hang on to. So I want to make sure that we are on track, building our local economy, investing on the businesses that are here, and making sure that we're moving forward with citizen participation. I ask you to join me in my vision and our direct plan to create a better Ogden and move us forward on November 5th and elect me, Angel Castillo, for Ogden Mayor.
Mayor Caldwell, what are your specific qualifications to manage a city of 90,000 people?
That's a great question, and it is managing a city of 90,000 people. You have all kinds of services that are a part of that. I would say we have 700 employees. I manage 450 employees, and when I worked for the Select Organizing Committee, I manage 700 now. I've got extensive professional backgrounds in managing and dealing with people. One of the things you'll find is that not everybody has all of the answers. My opponent just said we're having a hard time recruiting and retaining police officers. We have the first full office of police officers. We don't have openings now. We've had them 15 years. So we've managed that. We've addressed that in spite of a number of the challenges. There are over 700 open positions along the Wasatch Front in law enforcement right now. We have managed our way through that. Nothing's going to be perfect in that regard, but you do. You deal with the people you have, you work with them, you talk with them, you get a management strategy together, you bring in the best and brightest minds to help you address some of those difficult problems. And I've done that on every level. When we talk through my experience with the county, when we talk through being the CEO of the Convention Visitors Bureau, managing the ramp tax, being the PIO for Weber County, I believe in results really matter, and we've seen that in Ogden City. A lot of those national media stories 10 or 15 years ago, we would have never thought we would be in the national spotlight for a well-managed community, one of the best places to raise a family, one of the most economically viable and economically mobile communities in the entire United States of America. That doesn't happen by chance. That doesn't happen by wish. That happens with a lot of hard work and surrounding yourself with a lot of the right people that can bring those answers and bring that experience to the table. I have that. I've displayed that my entire career here in Ogden City and with Weber County, and that's something I'll continue to do into the future. I really believe in this community. It's why we moved here. We raised our kids here. My kids have seen some great success out of the Ogden School District and the programs that are offered here. My two brothers over there got into medical school through Weber State University. I'm really proud of them and this university. That's something I'll continue to support. I think collectively we build this together.
Thank you. Angel, what are your specific qualifications to manage a city of 90,000 people?
I spent 2 years working with a city that has 3.2 million people lobbying for a particular interest in this town that I lived in called the Arts District. And while I am not qualified to manage 3 million people, I am qualified to be able to hire the appropriate people to do the job that needs to be done that focus on specific areas of need. That's one of my qualifications as a marketing consultant. I come into a business, I analyze the problem, I see what we need, and I hire the appropriate team. Do we need an MBA? Do we need an economist? Do we need a contractor? Who do we need to bring in? And that's a very lean and mean and facile way to program a project so that you can bring people in and out as you need them without creating a financial burden for the company that you're with. And so, having worked with government before and having seen what it's like to have a city that doesn't have an updated general plan, having seen a housing crisis and a homeless crisis, I am really impassioned about making sure that Ogden stays the way that we like it. Gritty, small feeling, but controlled. We have a housing problem and we have a homeless problem. And we want to make sure that that doesn't happen any more than it does in other states. In 2018, HUD estimated that Ogden had a shortage of over 4,000 low-income housing units. And census data confirms that 8,000 renters are on the precipice of financial ruin. We can't stop ignoring that. We need to look at the missing middle, and we need to start addressing these housing problems. They're not going to go away. And the current administration keeps saying that we don't because they're using Ogden Clearfield numbers, a group of 600,000 people. Ogden is 90,000.
Thank you.
All right, now for Angel first. What is your plan for city department heads? Do you plan to retain them or reorganize?
As a marketing consultant, the first thing I do when I go into any job is I talk to every single person, because every single person may be having a different experience that nobody has ever gotten the full idea of what it is that they want to do and how they operate. I intend to interview every single person in the administration that is at a managerial level and find out where they are and are they doing what's best for Ogden. I want to make sure that they have an opportunity to shine if they've been hobbled. Or do they feel that they don't have the tools to do the work that they need to do? Every single person is going to be interviewed and spoken to and given a chance before we even bring in outside sources. You need to see what you have, and you need to find those key people on that team and make sure that they are retained to continue success. And if somebody is not performing adequately, then we start to bring in outside people to see if that works better.
Mayor Caldwell?
Well, I think we have a phenomenal team of department directors in Ogden City right now. Next year, I'll be the president of the Utah League of Cities and Towns, and I would put our team of department directors with their experience level, their passion for the community, what they're able to accomplish. I'd put our team up against anybody in the state, hands down right now. So I would absolutely retain most of our management and senior staff. They're the best at what they do, and Ogden's a little bit of a different animal than a lot of the other cities along the Wasatch Front. They know it. They're passionate about it, they're really good at what they do, and I will absolutely support that team of department directors that we have in place right now.
Mayor Caldwell, public safety has been discussed by both of you as a key city function. Discuss how you would improve public safety in Ogden and how you would fund any changes.
That's something I'm extremely proud of. Last year we had a 20.1% reduction in Part 1 crime. And that doesn't come from a department that doesn't like what they're doing and doesn't feel inspired or passionate about the job that they're performing. Chief Watt has done a phenomenal job. One of the things that gets talked about with law enforcement, and unfortunately nationwide, is they want to see some changes with police policy and find ways to support our men and women in blue. One of the hardest jobs that there are. Chief Watt's made over 60 changes in terms of policy and compensation in just the last 2.5 years. He flew around the country as one of the primary consultants for police department improvements, police department efficiencies, and proactive policing. We have the Real-Time Crime Center that's done an amazing job tracking crime, figuring out where it's at, and being proactive about policing the community. That's part of the result of that 20.1% historic reduction in Part 1 crime along the Wasatch Front. We were one of the top 3 in terms of overall crimes per 1,000 residents for a long time. Now we're lower than 15th in terms of cities along the Wasatch Front. I'm really proud of the work that they've done. That's something we'll continue to look to find ways to fund. You have to find ways to keep people happy. It's not just all about the paycheck, it's about the support they get, the tools they have to perform their job, the support services. So when they call in, is our dispatch center taking those calls, routing them correctly, bringing people together, getting them back up when they need it, or getting them on the right calls at the right times. There's a lot that goes into that other than just compensation, and our department, I think, is the most proactive in terms of those unique strategies along the Wasatch Front. We had a lot of laterals that left to Salt Lake a while ago, and we're seeing a lot of them come back because they want that smaller department feel, and they want to feel like they have the support of the chief and the administrative staff that are all there. So I'm really proud of the work that they've done, and we'll continue to look for ways to find ways to compensate them and make sure that they're benchmarked with all the other departments along the Wasatch Front. The unique thing about that is that Salt Lake does their compensation study, and they benchmark Seattle, San Francisco, and Denver. We're none of those 3 communities, and so we have to realize what we can do and be realistic about it.
Thank you. Angel?
Well, I have spoken to over 40 officers on our police department. I have gone through the Citizens Police Academy. I have a very good idea of how difficult our officers' jobs are. It's extraordinarily stressful. Our officers are amazing individuals, and when you ask most of them why they joined the police force, they will tell you because they want to serve people. Our officers care, but our officers are overworked and underpaid. And it has been a chronic cycle that has gone over and over. And while we may be staffed up now, that is going to be an ebb and flow that has been happening for over 8 years. Yes, it's not all about the money, but money is a very large part of it. When our officers have more calls per officer than anybody in Salt Lake or Salt Lake County, why would you work twice as hard for significantly less money when you could go to another department and have a cushier job? Our officers are so challenged. They want to be here. They're overworked, they're underpaid, and we do not have enough staffing to do patrol units where people can get out and walk in their cars. It's called community policing. And that has been a chronic problem that we've had in all of our communities, especially the ones that are at risk, crave that officer contact. They want to be able to know 6 officers are going to patrol this particular area, and I'm going to have their cell phone numbers, and I can reach out to them whenever I have an issue. But right now we can't do that because everybody is constantly moving around for vacation days and sick days, and we're not fully staffed at all times. This is a chronic problem and it needs to be solved, and we can solve that by first and foremost raising the officers' salaries. We have over $50 million of commercial property that the city has purchased with no return on investment. Why are we buying property that is not returning on investment when we have officers that I consider our infrastructure that need to be supported with really solid pay and good programs and a community that supports them so that when they are out in there and walking the beat, that they have the connections that they need.
Can I
Thank
take
you.
my 30 seconds on that?
Yeah, of course.
Because I've heard that comment a couple of times, that there's $50 million in commercial investments through our economic development department that aren't paying any return on investment, and that's patently false.
Thank you.
Do I get a 30-second rebuttal for that? Yeah, I would. I'm looking at the Hostess property. I'm looking at the Swift building. We have properties that we've owned for over 8 years that have no return on investment. The Rite Aid project. All of those were noted in the Standard Examiner. Those numbers are from the Standard Examiner of what we've invested in those properties. None of those properties have a return on investment. And we are currently in negotiation with Union Pacific to purchase more commercial property behind Union Station. I want to be more responsible with your tax dollars and focus on our infrastructure, our streets and our sidewalks and our public safety, rather than investing.
Thank you. Now, with Angel first, with the expected growth along Wasatch Front, there is a need not only to focus on housing, but other basic city infrastructure needs as well. What is your plan to improve Ogden City's transportation infrastructure?
Well, our transportation infrastructure has already been taken care of with UTA with regards to the BRT expansion. And that is something that we didn't have anything to do with. UTA looked at 3 other cities and decided to run them through a matrix and picked 3 cities that were going to yield them the highest amount of profit. And then they asked those cities, hey, would you be interested in participating in this? And then they said yes, and then we went ahead. And as a planning commissioner, that's kind of how it worked. I drew some lines going east-west of where we thought those things needed to be. But the UTA is handling that, and it's in good hands. But with regards to our moving people around, we need to continually explore better options with our planning for transit-oriented destinations. As we're growing as a city and taking advantage of UTA grants that are available to build high-density housing along a transit line, we need to make sure that that happens. One of the first things I want to do is I want to change our code. We used to have 7 properties that were along a transit line, and we had to approve 2 of them because our code is not updated, and it allowed a quick quack car wash and a 7-Eleven gas station 100 feet from a bus stop, 2 blocks from the front runner, when we could have had a 250-unit apartment building with commercial on the bottom, yielding a high return on investment for those taxes and providing people places to live along a transit line and spend less time in their cars. As a planning commissioner, we are always trying to find out how do we make sure that we have less people in cars and that they have a great, walkable, vibrant experience in our city.
Mayor Caldwell, what is your plan to improve Ogden City's transportation infrastructure?
Well, the notion that UTA would have just swept in without a ton of heavy lifting from the city is not accurate at all. That's been a decade's worth of work. I was chair of the Wasatch Front Regional Council over the last 2 years, and they do all of the master planning and long-range planning for what happens along the Wasatch Front, for how we prepare for growth. We got $20 million in Tiger grants to do the Grand Avenue Promenade that you see out there, that connects the River Project, the Temple, the Junction, and will connect all the way to 25th Street. We've seen almost 800 units of that type of transit-oriented development come into the downtown area in just the last handful of years. It's interesting, when we started building some of those downtown units, there was not a commercial lender that would lend on those properties because they didn't think it was commercially viable or that they could bank the loans for people coming into that. Now it's very robust, and we see a lot of interest in that development in the downtown core, that higher density development that's attached to transit lines and to bikeable, walkable areas. That's been a critical part of it. We also got involved with the Prop 3 funding, so we can have an extra money to address our roads and our sidewalks and some of that infrastructure. Ogden's unique in that it's the oldest city along the Wasatch Front, so a lot of that is aging, and it's not just roads, it's water infrastructure, it's power infrastructure. There's a lot of that infrastructure that a lot of people don't see under the ground that is critical to look at, and we've done a heavy lift in the last 8 years in improving a lot of that infrastructure. But transit and how we move people around is critical to our community. We're on the line for 2023. We got $100 million from UDOT to do the full interchange at 24th Street. That will improve people coming in and out of our community a lot more. That's a half interchange now. We've got that pushed up by almost a decade. So we are putting tens of millions of dollars into the transportation infrastructure that exists now. And we're combining it with the bicycle master plan and a lot of those other things, and with what's happening with the growth of the university. Those are all critical considerations.
Thank you. Mayor Caldwell, Ogden has been able to endure the erratic economic downturns over the past several decades. Based upon the national rhetoric of another pending economic downturn, how would you lead Ogden through something like this?
Well, I feel like we have been doing that. One of the important things that I think Ogden has that not a lot of other people have is we have a really unique economy up here that has a lot of diversity to it. Hill Air Force Base is a phenomenal example of that. 22,000 people on site at Hill Air Force Base, largest single point employer in the nation. And when you go through an economic downturn, typically defense doesn't see the same kinds of cuts that a high-tech industry will see, or some of those other areas. We also have a lot of the ecosystem to support that base. One of the things that shocked me is we have over 6,000 businesses, whether it's boots to bolts to burgers to buns, to help support the mission at Hill. And all of those people will stay strong through the downturn. When we had the big one in 2007 and 8, we certainly felt a pinch, but we didn't feel it in the ways a lot of other communities have. The manufacturing that occurs here is really unique as well. That is more recession-proof than a lot of the other industries that we bring in. We've got one of the biggest manufacturing clusters, and we're the largest net exporter in the state of Utah in terms of goods that are built here and goods that are sent out into the world for consumption. So we're in a fairly good spot. Everybody's nervous about a recession, and you need to be very careful with budgets and making sure you have a rainy day fund. When I came into office, the legal minimum for your cash on hand was 5%, and we were 5.01% for the legal minimum. We've worked really hard to stockpile some of the extra money we've seen, some of the things that will be coming online, like the BDO RDA expiring, and some of those things. We've planned and budgeted for that and 5 years out. So that's something we're looking at. That's something that's keeping us up nights. That's something we're talking with the council about. How do we be really responsible and conservative with that, so if it does hit, we're prepared and we don't have to move a lot of people out of the city, out of employment or anything else. So that's something we're working for and we've been planning on for a number of years.
Thank you. Angel, how would you lead Ogden through something like this?
Well, I find it really interesting that my opponent's first response is pointing to Hill Force Airfield, which has absolutely nothing to do with the direct economy in Ogden. It's outside of Ogden. It's in that Ogden-Clearfield metro area. My first concern would be our local businesses that are here right now. What can we do for our local businesses here? What can we do to prepare them for a possible economic downturn? How can we connect them to financial resources to grow their business, to buy that extra piece of equipment, to buy that piece of property, to develop a path to personal wealth through a business? We live in a gritty, bootstrap, entrepreneurial type of economy, and we are not fully investing in that economy. We are not reaching out to our local people, asking them what they need. 2-Bit Street Cafe on 25th Street, Mayor Caldwell has never been in there. He has never asked them what they need to be successful. And I've spoke with a group of 10 business people on 25th Street who are very concerned because there are 6 empty businesses on 25th Street. And as a mayor, 25th Street is that crown jewel. It's where all the tourists go. It's where Union Station goes. And how can you possibly be effectively managing what you're touting as the crown jewel of Ogden when you're not on the street and you're not asking those businesses what they need? So I would not be looking outside of Ogden. I would be looking into Ogden. I would be looking into our smaller businesses and getting with them before the possibility of an economic downturn, the slow starts, and to make sure that we are prepared as it comes. What do they need for expansion? How can we connect them with loans? How can we connect our community and turn up the volume on their marketing to support for their goods? How do we spread that message outside of Ogden to draw people in? If we don't start focusing on 25th Street, where it's going to be a 25th Street with cool old buildings that has mortgage brokers and real estates, and don't get me wrong, we all need them, but 25th Street is about cool indie businesses, and we need to keep that character of Ogden.
I'll take my 30 seconds on that. I have been into 2-Bit Street, and so it's unfair to say I've never been in there. And
Penny
our
told
Business
me you
Information
hadn't been
Center
there.
last year did 600 individual counseling sessions for small businesses. So that is an enormous focus of what we've done, and we do small business loans to those that come through and get those counseling services through the Business Information Center. Tom and his group do a great job of reaching out and understanding what some of those needs are and providing tools and resources to those that need them.
Well, I encourage you to reach out to Penny because she said you have never set foot in her restaurant.
Never seen you, Mike. I've been there for 17 years. I've never seen you.
I've been in there.
All right, next question for Ms. Castillo. What is your short and long-term vision for the downtown corridor, historic 25th Street, and keeping the iconic Union Station as the anchor to our historic district?
It is an anchor, it is a jewel. We have to make sure that we retain the character that 25th Street has and Union Station has. We are nothing if we cannot hold on to our history and be able to share that with our children and people who are visiting. The beautiful historic buildings, those really cool old trains, they need to be part of the experience, and we need to make sure that those are preserved. That, again, coming back to getting down there and talking to all of the businesses that are on 25th Street and looking at the Union Station and figuring out how we can retain its character, but yet build up development around it. And I think the most important thing about that is community engagement. You can't just hire a company from another state to build what you might think with and not have design charrettes with the local community and ask them how they feel. Ask them what they think. Ask them what they want to see. City Council did that. They spent $55,000 of their very own budget because your voices really matter to them. I think the current administration is totally lax on doing that. They haven't done anything similar. I intend to be able to be in the streets, running charrettes, making sure I see people every quarter, accessible. Tell me what you want and tell me what you need, and let's pair you up with the experts that are going to help your business succeed and how we can protect the iconic nature of 25th Street and Union Station.
Mayor Caldwell, what's your short and long-term vision for the downtown corridor, 25th Street, and keeping the iconic Union Station as an anchor?
It's interesting because we've had 10 design charrettes with a whole bunch of people from the community and interested stakeholders in the community. We brought different groups in with different professional opinions on what's going to happen there. Union Station's absolutely the anchor for that, and the lease on that land expires with UP in 2027. So one of the things we've been working on is getting that land back from Union Pacific, having them either sell it or donate that to Ogden City so we can go in and look at ways to improve that Union Station. 12 years ago, that was given to Union Station was given entirely, its operations and management was given entirely to a nonprofit organization that didn't have the money to go in and support it and do preventative maintenance in there. Just a few years ago, we pulled that back into the city and we spent over $500,000 a year doing a lot of that preventative maintenance to make sure that Union Station stays that iconic feature in our downtown area. That's something that we've been very involved in, and it's something we've involved a lot of the community in as well. I got a text message from Mitt Romney's chief of staff because we had a hard time getting a hold of the president of UP and really getting some pressure on that, so we reached out to our congressional delegation. We've had them pressing to make sure that Union Pacific knows how important it is. We had them here just in May for the sesquicentennial celebration, the 150-year anniversary of that. We had an opportunity to sit down with them, talk about ways to secure that and make sure that's a part of our future for the long term and well into the future. We're doing everything that my opponent just said we probably should be doing with Union Station, and we've been working on that for 5 years.
Yeah.
And yet none of the community is aware of it.
Thank you. Mayor Caldwell, tourism plays a vital role in Ogden. What would you do to make sure tourism continues to thrive?
Last 5 years, we've seen tourism increase by almost 85% when you look at tourism-related taxes. And so I had the opportunity when I was working for Weber County to be the president of the Convention and Visitors Bureau for a year and a half while we really did look at ways we could improve tourism and tourism-related investments in our community. We have a couple of really unbelievable crown jewels. Snow Basin, if you haven't been there, it is world class. And when I had the chance to work for the Olympic Committee in 2002, and having been a lifelong Ogden resident, it was inspiring to me to see that event happen. We had the two events here, one at the ice sheet with the curling and then the Snow Basin speed events. But when the torch came downtown, we saw 106,000 people come downtown when most of that was still vacant and boarded and not very welcoming. We worked really hard to identify What makes us unique? What can nobody compete against? What can we be world class at? And we've identified events as a way to do that and to bring people in. This year alone, with the Sesquicentennial and some of the other things we've been able to produce and organize, we'll see well over 200,000 people that come into our community, whether it's for a special event, the marathon, Xterra, or to ski or spend a vacation here. 3 years ago, I think it was Powder Magazine rated us as the second best city in North America to have a unique ski experience and a ski vacation. Those are things we've worked really hard on, and it didn't come easy. When we were working on these things in 2002, there were no reasons to come to downtown Ogden. In fact, the hotel properties at the time said, we don't even chase the ski market because we don't see any return on investment and we don't see a way to bring people into our community. We've completely flipped that now, and that's something I'm really proud of. And I've been very much boots on the ground and shovel in hand and helping to move and to drive that initiative. So that's something I'll continue to do.
Thank you. Ms. Castillo, what would you do to make sure tourism continues to thrive?
Well, first and foremost, Ogden is absolutely amazing for its outdoor experience. It is one of those things that you have to be here to really understand it, to fall in love with it. It's similar to showing someone a picture of the Grand Canyon, which looks nice, but until you get there and then you have a spiritual experience. Many people, when they come to Ogden, including myself, had a spiritual experience. I didn't know that I was emotional about mountains until I had them. I came here for a bike race, and I fell in love, and I decided that this was where I was going to grow old and I was going to die. Now, outdoor rec is fine and good and awesome and wonderful, and I'm a big, big fan of it, but we need to start looking outside of just outdoor recreation and events that are focused here. We need to start looking at what is going to help not only bring people to Ogden to experience Ogden, but is also going to grow our tech sector. We need to be looking at other countries and bringing in robotics competitions, technology and hacker things. There is no reason with Governor Herbert's initiative on Point of the Mountain in Silicon Valley why we cannot have an experience like that here. Why we can't bring people here to fall in love with our town as we have, and also bring in a new infusion of types of events. Technology, robotics. I mean, tourism is great for, come and look at a particular town, but let's start to connect that to business. Let's start to connect that tourism event to, hey, wouldn't this be a cool place to open a technology company? What do you know? Almost all of Ogden is an enterprise zone, so you get huge tax credits. We have so much to offer with regards to technology, and our focus has been lax. The outdoor industry, while fantastic, is not going to save us. We need to start diversifying our portfolio, the types of businesses that we're recruiting, tapping into the talent that we have at Weber State University for people who are engineers and are involved in technology, and making sure that we can either support them as an entrepreneur to start growing here or to bring in other companies that they can work for.
I would just reinforce that we have one of the most diverse economies in the entire Wasatch Front, so all those things are being addressed.
Next question for Ms. Castillo. The City Council recently voted to provide tax incentives to a developer who will build a hotel in Ogden. How do you reconcile funding new development against the need to repair existing structures such as the Marshall White Center?
That is a fantastic question, and we have, as a city, been giving away tax increment financing like it's candy. Don't get me wrong, it plays its place. There's a time and a space to be able to use tax incremental financing, but now that we have extra bonuses that are available from the federal government, dollar for dollar tax breaks from the federal government for the enterprise zone that we don't necessarily have to be giving away everything we have as a city. The Marshall White Center is an iconic institution that serves a very particular subset of our culture. And we want to make sure that those kids can actually have access to that. And the whole point of the Marshall White Center is to make sure that we have kids getting opportunities to be occupied, to be mentored, to participate in sports, to participate in arts and creativity. That pool has been non-repaired for almost 2 years. And it's going to cost $2 million. And Mark Johnson will tell you, well, we're talking to the YMCA, and wouldn't that be great? And yes, a YMCA would be great, but a YMCA should be in a different part of the town because that particular facility serves a very select community that needs it the most. Those kids get to go swimming for $2. They can't get in a car and go somewhere else and participate. So we need to make sure that we are taking care of the needs of that community and honoring the Marshall White name and why that center is there to serve communities and to bring us together. So in answer to your question, I would be very judicious with TIF, particularly because we need to find the money to fix the Marshall White Center, and we need to find more money to pay our officers more, and we need to find more money to develop our smaller businesses. So I don't want to be giving away everything unless there is a dollar for dollar return on investment and a guarantee with a developer.
Thank you. Mayor Caldwell, how do you reconcile funding new development against the need to repair existing structures?
Well, it's always a balance. There's always going to be a balance there. I'll give you one great example of RDA financing, though, that was required and has been a huge boom for everybody. The VDO project, that expires this next year, and that'll be $1.5 million to Ogden City and $3 million to the school district. And one of the facts is when you're in an older community like ourselves that's built out, we don't have bare dirt to work with. So Farmington Station and all of these other areas that we see in western Weber and Davis counties that don't have a whole lot of built out infrastructure, they can start with bare dirt. We do redevelopment here, and that's what those tools address, is redevelopment. So you take blighted blocks that would sit vacant for 20 years, you wouldn't see any real improvements if we didn't put some of that money in. You incent them to come in, and then when those RDA districts expire, everybody's a winner at the end of that. So we can choose to kind of do nothing and hope that people will come in knowing there's a lot of other way easier development projects that can be picked, and they will go to those that are much easier to do, or we can help work with them, give them a master plan, tell them what we'd like to see, and build some of that infrastructure so that we do have a broader tax base and more economic return to pay our officers and to do things like the Marshall White Center to provide services in the community. Marshall White's been a big topic. The pool did surprise everybody that it cracked, and we had life safety issues there, and it is enormously expensive. But right now we're putting a $400,000 roof on that building. We've worked with the Utah Jazz to put a brand new basketball court in down there, and we worked with Real Salt Lake to put a football court in on an old tennis court that hasn't been used. That's to the tune of almost $700,000 to give kids access to opportunities there and to continue improving that. We don't have a huge surplus that we can just go write a check for $2 million for the pool, and we want to study to make sure that that's the right investment for the community. So we try to measure twice and cut once when it comes to big public investments like that, and we're in the measuring process to try and figure out what the best use is for that facility.
Thank you.
30 seconds.
Go ahead.
I find it interesting that my opponent is always pointing towards the BDO as an example of how redevelopment agencies work, and they work really well. And the BDO was developed in a private partnership with Boyer previous to my opponent's administration. So that is nothing that has happened on this current administration. The BDO is the largest cash cow for Ogden City, and it's a wonderful thing. And again, I keep pointing back to the properties that we've been buying that have not been returning on investment, where we're giving away major tax credits, and there's still no signed development agreement, and there's still no return on investment.
Thank you. Mayor Caldwell, Weber State University, Ogden Weber Tech College, and the Ogden School District are key stakeholders in our community. How do you envision working with our educational institutions?
Well, it's a great question and one I'm passionate about. Being a Weber State graduate, my experience here in 1992 was a great one. I mentioned my two little brothers over there that got into medical school through Weber State University. And we didn't have a lot of money when we were growing up, and I had to self-fund everything. And like a lot of the traditional students here, I worked 40 hours a week to get through school. When I got into the job, I came and met with then President Ann Milner and said, what can the city do to better work with Weber State University? You're the biggest pool, our labor pool all comes from Weber State University. You're the largest employer here. What can we do to help support Weber State better? And she said, Mike, that's a great question. We have not had a single conversation with anybody from Ogden City in the prior 7.5 years, which I found to be shocking. So we started the College Town Initiative. The City Council got on board with that. We got on board with that. Worked hard with Weber State to identify ways we could help support each other. That's now been going for 7.5 years. We were recognized one year by the National Town and Gown Association as one of the best city and college relationships in the country because of that proactive work approach. Weaver State just hired a director of economic development. One of the things we found was that the university and the local labor pool weren't working together or having as many conversations as we thought they should. We've plugged our economic development department in that, and we want to know what the labor market needs so that the university and the tech school can be supplying that. There's also a program out of the tech college called Custom Fit. And so when an employer comes in and they have a whole bunch of training needs and they're not really sure how to do that, the tech center can build a curriculum, invite all of their students in, train them up, and give them certificates to go back to work, and that's not an expense to the company. So we've worked very hard with both the tech college, the school district, and the university to have that dialogue and to try to be as nimble as we can. Sometimes a university is a battleship that takes 5 miles to turn when you're looking at state board of regents and board of trustees and everything else, but having those conversations gets that momentum in the right direction, and we've been doing that.
Thank you. Ms. Castillo, how do you envision working with our educational institutions?
Well, I think it's a twofold process, and first let's address Weaver State. 9 months ago, when Brad Mortensen first started his job, I ran into him at a planning commission design charrette, and I walked up to him and I said, Brad, what is it that you need that you're not getting from Ogden City? And Brad said, wow, nobody's ever asked me that question. So it would appear that while my opponent has worked with the previous administration, he wasn't that connected with the existing administration. And so we sat down and we talked about what Brad needed, and Brad needed student housing, and not necessarily student housing on campus, but that was a big need for him. And we need to be able to connect our stakeholders to development relationships to help them get the products that they need to be built. And again, I need to remind you that Ogden most of Ogden is an opportunity zone. It is a good thing for developers to be developing here. They get all sorts of tax credits. And with regards to our school, I have spoken to Dale Wilkinson, who is a he's been a principal at several schools and well respected in the community, and I've sat down with the Utah School Board, with Gina, and we've had conversations about why our scores on our kids are so not great. I'm trying to be very PC. They're not very good. And they're not very good, and that hurts us from a business standpoint. And so I said, what's going on? And I took tours of the schools, and I went to T.O. Smith, and I tried to find out what was happening. And we have issues in our schools that are outside of the school. It is not our teachers' fault. It is not the school district's fault. We have kids that have economic challenges, that have medical challenges, transportation challenges, childcare challenges, food challenges, high mobility, all rolled into, and then all put ESL on top of it. We need to be reaching out to our local nonprofits and working with them and backing them as a city with a grant so that they can have a larger pool to work with to help lift these kids up, to give them the opportunities that they need for a pathway to success.
Our final question will be offered by Nikki Timmerman. There were several students that submitted questions, and unfortunately they all have to work so they can pay for their tuition here. But Nikki is able to be here tonight, so she will ask the final question.
Would either of you be willing to hold regular meetings with and for the public, and if so, how often?
Who's asked that question? That would be me. Well, in my opening speech, I told you that I am committing to quarterly town halls because I cannot believe that you can possibly be effective and be connected to the needs of your citizens if you don't sit down in front of them and let them have a conversation with you. Let them yell at you, let them tell you good things, let them tell you bad things. The long and the short of it is data is king. And you cannot possibly understand what people want until you have that conversation. And as I said in my opening statement, my opponent hasn't had a town hall in 8 years. So communication is everything. I commit to hold them every single quarter, and I'm also committing to do a monthly report card when City Council presents so that we talk about everything that we are doing. Communication and transparency are key to leadership, and our current administration doesn't seem to be able to have the connection that the community is asking for.
I'm not sure where you got your information on town halls. I can tell you when Trump was elected, I had 8 town halls with our police chief at the time because of some of the rhetoric that was coming in and some of the nervousness that we had in our community. And that was just in a 2-month period. So I have been open and accessible and been in the community and walked 25th Street, and that's critically important to what we're doing collectively. It's, you're absolutely right. This is a public job, and a lot of times I will introduce myself in different departments or different community boards as the primary complaint department for Ogden City, because we're out all the time and people have access to us all the time. If it's a town hall or it's another different format, we're still out and constantly in the community. We talked about the charrettes that we've had, engaging people, getting them involved, getting their voices, hearing what their passions and nervous areas are or areas of interest. We've been doing that. I think I've been doing that in a robust way over the last 8 years, and that's something that we'll continue to do. That's how we collectively move forward together. I saw an article just the other day again. This is the third time I've seen it in different years, but Ogden's was this year rated as the #1 most charitable community in the United States of America when it comes to volunteer hours given and charitable donations made to nonprofits and other areas like that. We collectively have done a lot of this. As a politician, sometimes you get up and say, well, here's what we've done in X, Y, and Z. This community has all done this together, and I'm committed to keeping that kind of momentum and the willingness to get out and to volunteer and to help and to shovel walks and do everything else that we've done in the last 8 years that I've been here. I've sat on almost all kinds of different community boards to get that feedback. It's not just the town hall, joining the chamber, it's volunteering for things, it's showing up all the time, and that's one of the things that I've taken great pride in, and not just the last 8 years, but in the last 17 years that I've been involved in this community. I've volunteered for almost everything that we could, and I'm very proud of that, and that's something that I'll continue to be involved in.
Well, that was the last question, and now we have 2 minutes each for closing remarks. Ms. Castillo, you'll go first, and then Mayor Caldwell.
I'd like to thank everybody for listening to this, and I know it must be frustrating that you're not able to ask your own questions and that you have to count on some pre-selected questions. And this is the reason why town halls are important. They're any question. They're you standing right there, letting people ask you whatever it is that they want for however long it's going to be, and you need to track that data so that you can make effective decisions with that. When I say town hall, that's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the police chief having something that there's happening in the committee and the mayor shows up. I'm talking about the mayor sits down, this is where I'm gonna be, this is the time, we'll be here for 2 hours, divided about how many people we've got. I'll give you 3 minutes, I'll give you 5 minutes, and if we only have 20 people, y'all get 50 minutes, whatever. It is important to have communication. My job is based on communication. You cannot possibly be an effective leader if you don't understand from the top to the bottom all of the people in your neighborhood and their different needs. All of the things that happen in East Central are very different than the things that happen on the East Bench, that are very different from the things that happen in West Ogden and on the southern tip of Ogden. You cannot possibly expect to really know what everybody needs until you are consistent with, I'm gonna be here every single quarter, and this is what you can do, and you can come to me and you can talk to me. I am going to have, when I'm elected, I'm gonna have professor hours. It'll be just like you, Bob. I'm gonna pick a couple of days where it doesn't matter what time, you don't have to have an appointment, but there'll be a 3-hour window where you can just rock in and tell me what you need, because not everybody can make town halls. And I'm gonna make sure that those town halls are at reasonable hours for people. And I'm going to look into tapping into Weber to get some childcare, because some of our people have families and they can't possibly go places and be civically engaged without childcare. So these are all the things that are important to me: communication and transparency. So November 5th, if you want communication and transparency, then vote for me, Angel Castillo.
I'll add my thanks to everybody being here tonight. It was a beautiful fall evening. You know, everybody had a lot of different choices on what they could have chosen to spend their time doing. I again will thank my opponent. They're hard things to do, and it takes a lot of courage to get involved and put your name out there. I'm a lifelong Ogden resident. Have my kids in the school district here. I went to Weber State University. I was at the county for 12 years. I've been in Ogden City now for 8 years managing this. I think it's important, as my opponent mentioned, it's important to know your community. and to get involved in your community. And I have a long track record of knowing this community, being in love with this community, putting my sweat equity into this community, and that's something that I think really matters. You can call them town halls, you can call them council meetings, you can call them all kinds of other design charrettes or whatever. Those communication tools are in place, and that's something I look around this room, and I've had a lot of long conversations with a lot of people in this room over different issues in the community. And you're right, there are pockets of areas of difference, East Central Ogden and the East Bench, but we understand those, and we've been in this for a long time. Our department directors are very involved in those areas, and that's something that we're extremely proud of. I am really proud of what's happened in Ogden with our police department, our public safety, and the quality of our neighborhoods. When I grew up here in 1992, we'd drive down 25th Street, and before a few pioneers dropped roots down there, you'd roll up the windows and lock the door and kind of peer over the door jamb. And it is an entirely different downtown than it was when I grew up here. That's work that we've all been very invested in that I'm very proud of. And I think we still have a lot of headroom in keeping Ogden extremely unique, but in growing the economy and being one of those places people really do choose to come and want to live. I mentioned a lot of the national news stories because that's them saying it, not me. And the third best place in America to raise a family, having 2 daughters of my own that I chose to raise here and put through the Ogden School District, that was important. And that's still important to me, and that's why we choose to meet with them and try to figure out ways we can support each other. There's not an endless set of funds, so we have to be very selective about how we do that, and the way we do that is understanding what those needs are and how to address that, because we don't want to raise everybody's property tax every year, and being conservative and thoughtful is something that we've had as a benchmark for us and will continue to be so.
We're on time, Julie. So, Dr. Cools, the chairman of our department, gives me the opportunity to teach one class every semester. And the title of that class is Leadership and the Political Life. And it's a joy for me to do that. In today's political world, and we all see it on the news every day, there's a lot of turmoil and a lot of disrespect for one another. And so when I start my class, the first day, I give each one of my students a coin. And the coin says kindness, the language the deaf can hear and the blind can see. That's written by Mark Twain. We have a real lady and a real gentleman running for Mayor of Ogden, and I'm going to give them each one of these to memorialize who they are. So thank you all for coming, and remember to vote. Thank you.